Is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jill Newbronner, and here are tonight's top stories. Chinese President Xi Jinping says tariffs and trade wars hurt the world economic order, even as Beijing reiterates that the door for talks with Washington remains wide open. That outreach coming after US President Donald Trump softens his stance on China. He says American levies on Chinese imports will not be anywhere near the 145% previously indicated. Seemingly undeterred by trade uncertainties, the world's largest auto expo opened its doors in Shanghai, with nearly 1,000 exhibitors showcasing the new electric world order. And Pope Francis' coffin has been moved to St. Peter's Basilica, where the public can pay their final respects to the late pontiff. Some surprise moves and multi-cornered fights in the mix as Nomination Day ramps up in Singapore, starting the city-state's countdown to its general election on the 3rd of May. Also on East Asia Tonight, South Korea's second biggest city, Busan, in the throes of an existential crisis as it combats low birth rates, super-aging populations and an industrial decline. Well, let's start today with a story that has seldom left the headlines since January, and that's the global tariff war. Even before investors and consumers can count the cost of the changing levies, US President Donald Trump seems to have taken a step back. Donald Trump hinting that tariffs will not be as high as first envisaged. On the other side of the world, Xi Jinping making use of his meeting with Azerbaijan's Ilham Aliyev to deliver a message to the international community. Roland Lim is here to take us through the new global order.
Thanks, Jill. Chinese President Xi Jinping has once again weighed in on the global economic situation, reiterating that tariffs and trade wars disrupt the global order. Mr. Xi emphasized that these economic steps undermine the legitimate rights and interests of all countries. The Chinese leader made the comments during a meeting with his Azerbaijani counterpart in Beijing. Mr. Xi added that China is ready to work with Azerbaijan to uphold the international system and to safeguard international fairness and justice.
今天我们将宣布两国建立全面战略伙伴关系。
The leaders signed 20 cooperation documents as part of China's Belt and Road Initiative in areas including legal, green development, and digital economy. Beijing also says it's willing to engage in trade talks with Washington a day after US President Trump signaled that tariffs imposed on China would be reduced once both sides reach a deal. However, it warned that Washington should not use pressure to do so.
如果美方真的想通过对话谈判解决问题，就应该停止威胁讹诈，在平等、尊重、互惠的基础上同中方对话。一边说要同中方达成协议，一边不断搞极限施压。 这不是同中方打交道的正确方式，也是行不通的。
Amid rising tariff worries, US President Trump sought to allay fears of an escalating trade standoff with China. He said that tariffs on Chinese imports will not be as high as the 145% that's been announced. He added it would be very nice to have negotiations with Beijing, but if China does not do a trade deal, the US will set terms of the agreement. Mr. Trump also addressed his frustration with Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. He said that he had no plans to fire the central bank chief.
The press runs away with things. No, I have no intention of firing him. I would like to see him be a little more active in terms of his idea to lower interest rates. This is a perfect time to lower interest rates. If he doesn't, is it the end? No. It's not, but it would be good timing. It could have taken place earlier, but no, I have no intention to fire him.
The softening in stance raising hopes of a potential de-escalation in US-China trade tensions. The optimism spreading to the trading floors. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index jumped 2.4%, while the Hang Seng Tech Index surged 3%. Mainland Chinese shares, however, finished largely flat. And I'll be doing a deep dive with an analyst into the IMF report that has slashed the global growth outlook. But for now, it's back to you, Jill.
Thank you so much, Roland. Now, we want to talk about the body of Pope Francis, which has arrived at St. Peter's Basilica, where he will be lying in state ahead of the final farewell Saturday. Now, thousands have gathered to mourn the passing of the Pope. The late pontiff's open wooden coffin was carried by the Swiss Guard in a procession from Casa Santa Maria, some 500 meters away, where Pope Francis lived and died. The faithful and general public are allowed to visit the late pontiff until 7 p.m. local time on Friday. The Pope's funeral will take place on Saturday at St. Peter's Square. The Vatican is expecting hundreds of thousands of people to attend. World leaders, including those from the US, France, Ukraine, the European Commission and the late Pope's home nation of Argentina, will also be in attendance. Let's get updates now from John Beaver. He is live from Rome. John, we're just seeing those live pictures there of streams of people coming to pay their respects. Is everything going smoothly?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And you can see behind me here that people are making their way down towards St. Peter's Square down there, where they are going to pay their final respects to Pope Francis. Now, in terms of what's happening here, it is a huge logistical operation now for the authorities here. We had that moving a very somber ceremony earlier as the body was moved, and now what we have is people coming to actually see the body of Pope Francis, and so that means that the authorities here are having to manage huge crowds of people, tens of thousands, it's believed, in attendance here locally at the moment. You can probably hear the helicopters flying overhead. There are various police forces walking around as well, making sure everything's going smoothly. We have patrols of mounted police as well. So there's a lot going on from authorities here in order to keep everything moving smoothly. As you said, the body of Pope Francis was moved into St. Peter's Basilica behind me, and that is where people will be able to go and pay their respects. I went and had a look at the queue a little earlier, and as you might imagine, it's absolutely huge and stretches from the Vatican all the way down some of the side streets of Rome and snakes its way round part of the Vatican as well. So a lot of people here all keen to pay their respects to the late Pope.
Yeah, I'm sure the crowds will continue until the funeral this weekend. And then what's next?
So in terms of what we have coming up, then obviously once the funeral has taken place, then obviously it's all eyes on the conclave and choosing the next Pope. There is a lot of talk about whether the Pope might be from outside the traditional European centre that popes have normally come from. Pope Francis, of course, the first South American Pope. So some wondering whether that might continue. There's been talk of a Pope from Asia or possibly a Pope from Africa as a way to spread the word of the Catholic Church there. We're going to have different factions within the conclave doing the voting, and that is a secret ballot. It is a ballot sealed from the outside world, so very hard to predict what's happening. It's 135 cardinals who can vote. You have to be under the age of 80 in order to be able to vote. More than half of the cardinals voting for the first time are from outside of Europe. And then as well as the geographical locations, you obviously have the different factions. You have some with differing opinions about some of the issues facing the Catholic Church, facing the world, whether the Pope should be a diplomat or more strictly a religious figure. We have all of these things being discussed when it comes to the voting. There is an old Italian saying, though, I'm told, which is, he who enters a conclave as a pope leaves it as a cardinal. So they're saying don't always back the favourite, and there's a lot that will be decided when the conclave gets started, which we believe will be probably the 6th of May.
All right, thank you very much. John Beaver there with that live report from Rome. Well, the question now is, who could replace Pope Francis, as John was talking about? Well, Vatican observers are predicting several possibilities. CNA's Julie Yu tells us more.
The process of electing a new pope, the conclave, usually begins 15 to 20 days after the pontiff's death. Electors will need to consider the priorities of the church and the profile of the candidate. Age is also a factor. So let's take a look at some of the possible successors. Italian Cardinal Pietro Parolin is considered a frontrunner. He was the Vatican's Secretary of State under Pope Francis, essentially acting as deputy pope. Cardinal Parolin is deeply familiar with the Church's central administration as well as the Vatican's vast international network. Pope Francis never weighed in publicly on who he wanted as his successor, but Vatican watchers say Cardinal Matteo Maria Zuppi would be and would have been favored by the late pontiff. Cardinal Zuppi was named Archbishop of Bologna, one of the most important posts in Italy. Another Italian contender is Pierbattista Pizzaballa, the Vatican's top official for Middle East affairs. He's considered an international figure that's removed from Vatican politics, although some experts say cardinals may consider him too young for the role at the age of 60. And it's possible the next pope could come from Africa. Cardinal Fridolin Ambogno Besungu is said to be a leading candidate. He has been Archbishop for Kinshasa, appointed by Pope Francis. Now, another potential African pope is Cardinal Peter Turkson. Like many cardinals in Africa, he's set to lean conservative. And there's speculation that the next pope could come from Asia. The Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle from the Philippines has decades of pastoral experience. The 67-year-old is considered a moderate and has even been dubbed the, quote, Asian Francis for his dedication to social issues.
Still ahead on East Asia tonight, Iran's foreign minister briefs China on the status of its nuclear war with the US, saying it is important to keep Beijing in the loop. And China rejects Kyiv's allegations that Beijing is directly assisting Moscow's war in Ukraine. Welcome back. We've got your business news with Roland Lim next. And Roland, Trump seems to be taking a bit of a breather on his tariffs. And we were talking during the break that do you think it could be all this market volatility and the prospect of no trade happening between these two economies finally hitting home?
It could well be, Jill. However, there's still no clarity yet on what happens after the rhetorical climb down. But President Trump's tariff policy are causing significant damage to the world economy. The International Monetary Fund has slashed its outlook for world growth for this year and the next, and the main cause for the slowdown? Tariffs. The global lender has warned the historically high tariffs that US President Trump has imposed on trade partners will be a major negative shock.
The surge in policy uncertainty is a major driver of the economic outlook. If sustained, the increase in trade tensions and uncertainty will slow global growth significantly.
In its latest projections, the IMF now says global economies will grow 2.8% in 2025. That's down half a percentage point from its previous estimate. And the US itself was given the biggest downgrade among advanced economies. The IMF now projects US economic growth to rise just 1.8% this year. That's nearly a full percentage point step down from the January forecast. The US and China were among countries to see the biggest IMF downgrades. China is tipped to expand 4% in 2025, below its target for the year. Japan, South Korea, and the 20-nation Eurozone have also seen their growth projections downgraded. For more, we are now speaking with Hao Hong, who is CEO of Huafu International Securities. He speaks to us live from Hong Kong. Hao Hong, good to have you on the show as always. Now, markets hate uncertainty, and the IMF says that policy unpredictability is at an extreme level. So how are stock markets, especially Asia's export-reliant hubs, likely to respond?
Yeah, well, I think obviously the market hates uncertainty, and also Trump's flipping around on a daily basis doesn't help. I think the volatility is mostly observed in the U.S. market, but then I think to a much less extent the Asian market, especially in the Chinese mainland Asia market and also in the Hong Kong, we're seeing some volatility. But then after the epic punch 2 weeks ago, the stocks here are making a comeback. So I would say that China is sticking to its guns, trying to delay the process to gain more bargaining chips in this process by complaining to the WTO and also talking to China's trade partners in the region, to form some sort of alliance to negotiate with Trump. So I think, in terms of market reaction, I would say that the U.S. stocks is reacting much more strongly to Trump's policy uncertainties.
Now, given China's 1.3 percentage point tariff-related hit to growth highlighted by the IMF, how do you assess Beijing's ability to cushion the blow through fiscal and monetary tools? Can domestic consumption really offset these external shocks?
I think right now people are expecting export this year would contribute much less to Chinese GDP growth, or some is actually expecting a subtraction from the GDP growth. But having said that, obviously, the physical machine in China is already humming, right? So if you look at the first quarter monetary statistics, you're seeing very strong government bond issuance in the first quarter of the year, and that makes money supply and also the financial condition much better than expected. I would say that going into the second quarter, because the effect of the tariff and also the effect on the global supply chain would be clearer, then I would say that economic numbers will start to look weak. And that is probably, the appropriate time for the Chinese government to act in terms of releasing its fiscal policy and also relaxing its monetary policy to stimulate the economy. In terms of consumption, how much growth can come from consumption this year, I would say that it really depends on how policy is going to respond, right? So we've been talking about handing out cash coupons, lowering tax brackets, and improving social welfare. And if all those can be sort of achieved to a certain extent in the second quarter, then I wouldn't be too surprised to see consumption being one of the better contributor to GDP growth this year.
Given the macro picture you just painted, has there been capital flight or a market re-rating both in China and in Hong Kong? And what signals should foreign investors be watching out for stability or a potential rebound?
Yeah, well, I think the Chinese market has been one of the better performing major market in the world yet today. And also, despite all that, right, so we're still seeing capital account being negative yet today. So it's suggesting a small amount of capital outflow is continuing, but not to a destabilizing effect. And also, if you look at the Chinese currency, especially the offshore CNH, is sort of lingering around 7.3, 7.25 sort of level. It's weakened to a certain extent, but not nearly as weak as the US dollars. So I think the US dollar is actually the worst performing major currency in the world yet today. So I would say that the Chinese authority is doing its best to stabilize the market, and also in terms of stock market performance, we're also seeing some stability as well. So I would say that going into the second quarter and third quarter, the effect from policy support would be even more pronounced than the first quarter.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Basilica has said that the current tariff standoff was, quote, unsustainable. If so, then what happens to financial markets and the business environment? Will we see a partial de-escalation, do you think?
Well, we're looking forward to a de-escalation, and hopefully, Scott Bessent is right. But then at the same time, obviously, Trump is out of control. And also, he's announcing his policy by tweeting, right? So, which doesn't help. So, even though everybody is looking for stability, but I think just Trump's stability will continue in the next couple of months until we can get some sort of settlement in terms of trade deficit. And even so, right? So even if Trump lowered the tariff on Chinese goods from 145% to maybe 35 to 45%, the Chinese export goods is still facing a substantial increase in terms of tariffs, and that would affect export growth this year, and also affects the U.S. demand for Chinese goods. So I would say that yes, stability is the key, and also it would help the U.S. stocks sort of stage a sustainable rebound from these sort of levels.
And we will be keeping a close eye on developments. Hao Hong, thank you very much for your time. He is CEO of Huafu International Securities. E-commerce retailers in China are getting a break from the government. Authorities are reportedly asking online platforms to change refund practices by the end of July. They are asking that merchants be allowed to require the return of goods when refunding customers. Now, this is to relieve financial pressure on merchants, particularly during economic slowdowns. Now, sellers of goods as varied as clothes and household appliances complain the policy is hard on their bottom line, as they risk losing both the money and the goods. Last year, hundreds of people gathered at an office of Pinduoduo platform Temu to protest against its refund policy, prompting government to take moves against the practice. And that'll do it for business.
All right, thanks so much, Roland, for that. Another news, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is in Beijing, where he briefed Chinese Vice President Ding Xuexiang on the status of nuclear negotiations with the U.S. The visit is taking place before the third round of nuclear talks between Iran and the U.S. It's this Saturday in Oman. Now, speaking to Iranian state media, Araghchi says that it is important that China is in the loop, adding that Beijing plays an important and constructive role over Tehran's nuclear ambitions. Now, China was a party to the 2015 nuclear agreement, which collapsed following the US's withdrawal in 2018. The two sides also discussed implementation of the 25-year Comprehensive Cooperation Plan. The plan, first signed in 2021, aimed to increase trade between Tehran and Beijing to $600 billion by next year. But data from the IMF shows that as of 2023, trade between the two was just over $12 billion. Reports also say that Araghchi delivered a message from Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei to Chinese President Xi Jinping, which reaffirms Iran's commitment to the partnership, regardless of the outcome of the nuclear talks. Now, Beijing has hit back at Kyiv's allegations that Chinese troops and companies are directly assisting Moscow's war efforts in Ukraine.
我们已就相关问题阐明过中方的立场，中方坚决反对无端指责和政治操弄。
The remarks come after Ukraine's foreign ministry summoned the Chinese ambassador to raise what it called serious concerns over Chinese involvement in Russia's war efforts. Kyiv also urged Beijing to stop supporting Moscow. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Chinese citizens are helping to produce drones at a facility in Russia. He also says Moscow may have stolen drone technology without Beijing's knowledge. Earlier this month, the Ukrainian leader said at least 155 Chinese nationals were recruited into the Russian army, 2 of whom have been captured by Kyiv's forces. Meanwhile, no let-up in diplomatic efforts to end the war as top officials meet in London after planned talks between Ukraine's allies faltered. Mr. Zelensky's top aide has vowed to work for peace, despite negotiations being downgraded to a lower level. Kyiv's delegations are also expected to meet with U.S. envoy Keith Kellogg. Well, Indian leaders formulating a response to a suspected militant attack in the northern Jammu and Kashmir territory. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called for a special security cabinet meeting after cutting short his two-day trip to Saudi Arabia. He condemned the terror attack and vowed to bring the perpetrators to justice. He also says that all possible assistance is being provided to those affected. At least 26 people were killed and 17 injured after a group of gunmen opened fire in a popular tourist town of Pahalgam. Reports say the assailants approached tourists at about 3 p.m. local time on Tuesday and started shooting from close range. Militant group the Kashmir Resistance has claimed responsibility for the attack. It expressed discontent regarding outsiders in the region and spurred a, quote, demographic change. Indian security agencies say the group is a front for Pakistan-based militant organizations. Islamabad has said it only provides moral and diplomatic support to the insurgency in Kashmir. Security across the Indian-controlled Kashmir has been tightened, and businesses in the area were reportedly shut down in protest against the attacks. Soldiers and police have been deployed to the territory to search for the suspected gunman who remains at large. China has strongly condemned the attack and offered condolences to the families of the victims and the injured. Coming up on East Asia tonight, car makers put pedal to the metal to court drivers at the Shanghai Auto Show before tariffs fully kick in. And Japan seeks to boost ties with Vietnam and the Philippines when Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba visits next week. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. Chinese President Xi Jinping weighs in on tariffs, warning that they hurt multilateral trading and impact the world economic order.
It's going to work out very well, but no, it's at 145%. They will not be anywhere near that number.
U.S. President Donald Trump there assuring that Washington and Beijing can iron out their differences and de-escalate the trade war. Trade war and safety concerns take center stage at Shanghai's auto show as foreign and Chinese car makers fight for pole position on electric vehicles. So the Shanghai Auto Show has opened against the backdrop of a U.S.-China tariff war as companies mull how this could sap consumer demand and upend supply chains in the long run. About 70 automakers from around the world launched more than 100 new models at the showcase. Taking center stage are domestic brands, including the likes of BYD, Xpeng, and tech giants such as Huawei and Xiaomi. Automakers also pivoted to a safety-first message at the show as the Chinese government cracked down on the marketing of smart driving systems. Xpeng, which touts its AI-driven driver assistance technology, said it would launch a safety training camp for drivers. BMW, meanwhile, said it would integrate DeepSeek AI in its new vehicles in China later this year. Nissan has committed to invest an additional $1.4 billion in China. It says the country's hyper-competitive auto market can help it develop electric vehicles, an area where it needs to improve in order to get back on its feet. The Japanese car maker made the announcement at the Shanghai Auto Show. The investment will be made by the end of 2026. Nissan also unveiled 2 new models at the show, including a plug-in hybrid truck called the Frontier Pro. It also announced it will develop 10 new cars in China, up from 8 previously, by mid-2027, and said all models will be exported without specifying when or where. Due in large part to weak sales in the US and China, Nissan is saddled with an outdated product lineup, production overcapacity issues, and a mountain of debt. In the aftermath of its failed attempt to combine forces with Honda, Nissan is back on the prowl for new business partners. Nissan isn't the only Japanese automaker looking for a fresh start in China. Honda unveiling an electric touring model and announced plans to work on assisted driving technology with China's Momenta as well as AI-supported in-car software with DeepSeek. Toyota Motor, meanwhile, rolling out 2 models. Xiaomi has quashed market reports suggesting the Chinese firm planned to delay the launch of its first sport utility vehicle following a fatal accident involving its flagship electric car. It says the YU7 release would go on as planned in June or July, but the firm's billionaire founder, Chen, would not attend the Shanghai show. A Bloomberg report citing sources said Xiaomi has also cancelled plans to unveil the SUV at this week's auto show and rescheduled its annual investor date from late April to June. Now, this comes as Xiaomi grapples with the fallout from a March 29th crash in Anhui province, where 3 women died after an SU7 sedan operating on autopilot collided with concrete barriers and burst into flames. It sparked public scrutiny of Xiaomi's assisted driving technology and battery safety. The accident has also drawn wider regulatory attention. The industry watchdog recently summoned over a dozen automakers to discuss stricter guidelines for autonomous driving systems. Shares of Xiaomi, have a look, they're up more than 7% today, but they have declined more than 16% in the past 1 month. Well, let's get more insights now. We're joined by Chen, Associate Professor from the School of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering at Nanyang Technological University. Mr. Liu, welcome. I want to ask you first what the factors are that are driving the manufacturers in what's this global interest in assisted driving. Is it part of this AI wave that we're all experiencing?
Yeah, definitely. So actually a big part of the interest comes from the rise of AI in general. AI, I would say, is an unstoppable trend, and the cars are no exception. They need to get smarter to better serve our human beings, drivers and passengers. And assistive driving is one of the most practical and helpful ways that AI is being used today. And it helps reduce human errors, improve safety, lower the driver's workload, distraction, and just make our driving more comfortable overall. And for car makers, it's also a key way to stand out in such a competitive market. And on top of that, all these features are paving the way for future fully autonomous vehicles. So it's not just about today's convenience, but also tomorrow's possibilities.
Yes, and as you mentioned there, it is about money. It is about the bottom line. It's about differentiating itself from its competitors and surviving this brutal war. So who do you think is standing out right now as the key players leading the smart driving manufacturing industry?
Yeah, actually, I think this is really a competitive space, and the key players vary across different regions. Tesla probably is one of the well-known one. They brought assistive driving into spotlight pretty early, though still with controversy. In Europe, like brands like Mercedes, BMW are moving ahead with level 3 system that can actually take over in certain situations like highway driving. And in Asia, companies like Huawei and Baidu are making strong progress too, especially when it comes to handling complex urban environments. But if I'm being honest, I think in the long run, particularly for autonomous driving, the race will likely be between the United States and China, because they both have top talents, leading AI capabilities, and large domestic markets that allow for faster development, real-world deployment, and technology iterations.
Interesting. I'm curious, is the drive to make smart cars also a reflection of demand for these smart cars? And I'm asking because these cars are nice to haves, right? But it's not a must-have.
Yeah, I think this is really a great question. I would say it's not something people need in the traditional sense, but once you try it, a lot of people may find it hard to go back. It's especially helpful during long drives or stop-and-go traffic. However, it's very important that our consumers understand both that these systems can do and what they cannot do. Actually, now there's still a lot of misunderstanding out there. Many people confuse assistive driving with autonomous driving, but actually they are very different things. Technically speaking, assistive driving means that the car can help you with certain tasks, like keeping in the lane, maintaining speed, but you yourself, the driver, are still fully responsible. You need to stay alert and keep your hands ready. Well, autonomous driving, on the other hand, is when the car can take full control. Then you can just relax, do other things, or even sleep. But we are not there yet for most cases. So with assistive driving, your eyes, your mind still need to be on the road. It's not the time to zone out or take a nap. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's in the word, isn't it? It's assisted. You know, there still needs to be some kind of...
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But still, you know, you had to explain that to us and you had to explain that to the viewers. So I'm wondering whether demand will be impacted by some of the challenges and the obstacles that smart cars have been facing recently. And I talked about safety as being one of the factors and also adapting to different road conditions in different countries. So what do you think?
Yeah, actually, there are still a lot of challenges, and I would say this is really a system-level problem. It's not just about the AI and technology itself. The challenges come from many different angles. First of all, technology. Technically, the AI has shown great potential, but for self-driving cars, such a safety-critical system, current AI ability is still not enough. It is still not ready to handle every possible situation, especially emergencies or unexpected scenarios. And then you have all the differences across regions, different road conditions, weather, traffic rules, local laws, regulations, government support policies, and even culture differences. People drive very differently in different countries. So all of that make it really tough to build one system that can work everywhere. So large-scale deployment across different markets is still a big challenge, and it will take time and collaboration across many fields to get there.
Absolutely. And I think another key player, as you mentioned there, is the issue of legislation and regulation, which sometimes plays catch-up in these areas. So do you think that this is an area that needs to be looked at closely?
Yes, for sure. As I said, all these different angles we need to take care. And I would say, in terms of the current state of the development, the assistive driving technology has limitation. Most systems on the road, we call them level 2. So which means the car can help with things like steering, speed control, but the driver still has to stay in full control at all times. And some companies are starting to roll out their level 3 features. Their system can take over in limited situations during slow-moving traffic or highway driving. But full self-driving, where you can completely take your hands off and pay no attention, that's still far away from being ready for everyday use. So every single angle we need to take care.
Right, and also regulation in the branding and the overselling of it has to be watched closely as well.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Associate Professor Liu Chen from the Nanyang Technological University there. The Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba is set to visit the Philippines next Tuesday. Tokyo has been seeking to boost regional ties in the face of American tariffs. Philippine officials say Mr. Ishiba and President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. will hold talks on financial, political and defense ties. Japan is a key security partner of the Philippines. Both sides have vowed to boost cooperation to counter Chinese actions in the disputed South China Sea. Before the Philippines, Mr. Ishiba will stop in Vietnam. His Southeast Asian tour follows Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to the region as Beijing aims to position itself as a reliable partner to its neighbors amid global trade uncertainty. Still to come on East Asia tonight, some surprise moves and multi-cornered fights in the mix as nomination day wraps up in Singapore, starting the city-state's countdown to its general election on the 3rd of May. And meet the one-year-old who has her own art exhibition in Tokyo. Hello again. South Korea's second largest city, Busan, is facing extinction due to the low birth rates, industrial decline, and a steady youth exodus. The city is trying to revitalize its economy in a bid to get its people to stay. CNA's Im Young-suk has more.
6 years ago, Kim Mi-yeon took over this warehouse in Busan's Yeongdo-gu district. She had no knowledge of the coffee industry, but wanted to revive the area, which has seen a reversal of fortunes as the port city's shipbuilding industry declined.
과거의 그런 흔적들을 남기면서 그 기록을 하는 거죠. 과거의 조선업 노동자들부터 이제 현재 살아가는 사람들, 그리고 미래의 변화될 모습들까지 약간 뭔가 진짜 부산이라는 생각이 좀 많이 들었어요.
The number of residents in Yeongdo-gu halved from its heyday in the 1980s to 110,000 last year. Despite new cafes and shops popping up as the government pushed urban regeneration projects, it's now classified as a population extinction area, a microcosm of Busan itself.
Experts say revitalization efforts typically offer low-paid jobs and offer a little bit of security. And they don't contribute to long-term economic growth.
The southeastern city of Busan is home to South Korea's busiest port. But it has largely failed to keep up with recent shifts in the global economy. Industries driving innovation and providing high-paying jobs like technology and finance converged elsewhere, such as the capital Seoul. And its youth followed. Lee Jang-bin, like many of his peers, plans to leave his hometown. He wants to work in the automotive sector, and he says there are just not enough opportunities here.
아쉬운 부분이 많이 크긴 크죠. 그게 일자리나 기회라는 측면이 더 있었다면은 부산도 지방도 좋은 기회가 있었으면은 그 지방만의 매력으로 또 성장할 수 있을 텐데 지금은 수도권 중심으로 아까 획일화된 느낌이 크게 들어서 그게 좀 아쉽습니다.
Busan's population shrunk from 3.29 million in 2023 to 3.27 million last year. It lost about 600,000 people over the past 3 decades. In contrast, more than half of South Koreans now live in the Seoul metropolitan region. Busan is trying to compete and develop its industries by supporting startups and improving infrastructure. A new international airport is set to be up and running by 2030. Lee Kyung-dok from the city's planning bureau says it will significantly improve accessibility to Busan.
외국에서 들어올 수 있는 곳은 굉장히 한정적입니다. 그러니까 부산에 오고 싶어도 인천을 거칠 수밖에 없거나 이런 한계가 있죠. 그리고 이제 신공항이 생기면 노선도 굉장히 늘어날 뿐더러 관련돼 갈 수 있는 국가도 굉장히 많이 늘어나겠죠. 신공항이 만들어지면 이 관광도시로서의 기반들은 갖춰지지 않나.
Busan attracted close to 3 million foreign visitors last year. Experts say the new airport could create more than 110,000 new jobs. But Busan will have to do more to fend off the threat of extinction and be a place where people want to not just visit, but to live. Lim Yan-suk, CNA, Busan, South Korea.
Well, for more on the crisis facing South Korea's second biggest city, do catch CNA Correspondent. That's tonight at 9:30 Singapore, Hong Kong time, or anytime on CNA.Asia or on YouTube. Some surprises in Singapore from nomination day that just wrapped up. My colleague Po Kok Ing has All the details. What's an election without twists and turns?
That's right, Jill. Big surprises this time round. Candidates from 11 parties registered to take part in the election on the 3rd of May. And for the first time since 2011, we have a walkover. The opposition Workers' Party did not contest Marine Parade Battle Heights group representation constituency, which means the ruling People's Action Party has already won 5 seats in Parliament. But that's not the only surprise there.
It seemed certain Manpower Minister Tan See Ling would anchor the PAP's team for Marine Parade Battle Heights GRC in the east of Singapore. But an hour later, the team turned up at the nomination centre in Kong Hwa School with no sign of Dr. Tan. Instead, he popped up at Jurong Pioneer Junior College, all the way in the northwest. And he was there for the Chua Chu Kang team. He later told reporters he was redeployed at short notice.
I think you're also aware of the fact that opposition parties have also kept the movements of their people, their star catch, so to speak, at the very last minute. I think we always have to be open to be redeployed at any particular point in time. I'm glad that PM and senior cabinet members think that I'm qualified enough to be redeployed here, because DPM Gan has very, very big shoes for me to fill.
Dr. Tan was referring to Deputy Prime Minister Gan Kim Yong, formerly part of the Chua Chu Kang team. Instead, Mr. Gan arrived almost at the same time Dr. Tan did, but all the way in the northeast, to lead the team for the new Pongo GRC and take on the Workers' Party. Back at Kong Hwa School, only papers for the PAP were filed for Marine Parade Battle Heights GRC. As nomination closed, it became clear that PAP would win uncontested. In a Facebook post, Workers' Party chief Pritam Singh said it was a difficult decision not to stand in Marine Parade Battle Heights. He cited changes in electoral boundaries and limited resources as reasons. He said WP must focus its best efforts on fewer constituencies in order to give its candidates the best chance of success.
Now that nominations are sewn up, election campaigning has begun. Be sure to catch all the action right here on CNA or on our website or mobile app. Back to you, Joe.
All right, thanks for that, Koke. Now, before we go, we bring you an exhibition in Tokyo that goes beyond the bedtime of its star artists. The abstract paintings are the creation of one-year-old artist known as Thumbelina. The director of the gallery hosting her work describes the toddler's style as babyish but mysteriously dexterous. The paintings by the toddler are on sale for $230 at her debut show. Thumbelina's mother is an evacuee from Ukraine who says she can see the rhythm in her toddler's movements and patterns. As a fellow artist focusing on Japanese calligraphy, her mum says she is jealous but happy of her daughter's first solo exhibition. Both Thumbelina and her mother remain anonymous for privacy reasons. Well, that's it for East Asia tonight. For this Wednesday, don't forget headlines anytime at cna.asia. Also check us out on Facebook and YouTube. Bye-bye.